You've seen it everywhere online, right? Stoicism. It promises this unbreakable mind, this fortress of inner peace. But what actually happens when you try to live by these ancient rules in our completely chaotic modern world? Well, we're about to break down a fascinating personal story of a 30-day experiment that went from a total breakdown to an absolutely incredible breakthrough. Okay, let's just dive right in.
We have all seen quotes just like this one from Marcus Aurelius. I mean, it's the kind of thing you find all over Instagram, usually plastered over a picture of a marble statue. And it sounds so simple, you know? So powerful. It's this seductive promise of control in a world that feels, well, completely out of control. And it's this exact promise that kicks off our entire story.
So why would anybody decide to go all in on Stoicism? Well, the person who did this experiment said his life was just pure chaos. We're talking a demanding job, a strained relationship, and just that constant low-level hum of anxiety. He craved what he called an emotional fortress. And, Stoicism looked like the perfect blueprint.
So he set himself this very clear, pretty ambitious goal. For 30 days, he was going to live like a modern Stoic. The plan was to use 3 core principles to build that fortress he was dreaming of and just find some desperately needed calm. So let's take a look at the tools he picked out for the job.
First up was amor fati. It literally translates to love of fate. The whole idea here is to not just tolerate whatever happens to you, good or bad, but to actually embrace it, to see it as necessary and part of your path. Yeah, a tough one for sure.
And next, the big one, the dichotomy of control. This is probably the most famous Stoic idea out there. It's all about drawing a clear line in the sand between what you can influence, so your own thoughts, your own actions, and what you can't, which is basically everything else.
And finally, maybe the most intense practice of them all, premeditatio malorum. So every single morning, he would intentionally sit there and imagine the worst things that could happen, losing his job, his relationship ending, a health crisis. The theory is that by facing your fears ahead of time, they lose their power over you. In theory.
But, oh boy, the gap between the theory and the reality turned out to be massive. For those first 2 weeks, this experiment didn't build a fortress at all. It built a prison. The very practices that were supposed to bring him tranquility, they brought him anxiety and isolation instead.
Remember that premeditation of evils? Well, it didn't make him feel prepared. He said his nervous system just didn't get the philosophical memo. It just registered constant, unending threat. I mean, he was essentially starting every single day by just terrifying himself.
And the dichotomy of control wasn't going any better. When he got criticized at work, his natural human response was shame and anger. But by telling himself he shouldn't feel that, he didn't make the feeling go away. He just buried it under this thick layer of guilt for even feeling it in the first place. This pressure cooker metaphor is just so powerful, isn't it?
And the damage wasn't just internal. His attempt to become this Stoic sage was actually wrecking his relationship. When his partner was upset, he'd offer this cold, detached logic instead of empathy, thinking he was being helpful. But all she heard was that her feelings were wrong or invalid. He was turning this warm, human connection into something brittle and cold.
I mean, something had to give. That pressure cooker was about to explode. And this leads us to the single moment where the entire experiment and his whole understanding of Stoicism completely changed.
Day 15, exactly halfway through. Picture this. He's driving home from work, just feeling numb and exhausted after another terrible day and an argument with his partner. He's been trying so hard to be this unmovable rock. Then, a sad song comes on the radio, and a single tear rolls down his cheek. And this was his first, conditioned thought. He didn't see a human feeling sadness. He saw a bug in his own programming, a purely analytical, almost robotic response.
But right after that initial thought came this one, a wave of just horrified self-awareness. In that split second, he saw the deep, dehumanizing thing his rigid practice had done to him. That one tear broke the dam. He pulled the car over and just felt everything.
And this is where he finally got it. This is the core insight. He realized the goal was never to become a statue, immune to feeling. The point was to learn how to be a human with feelings. That moment of weeping in his car, that wasn't a failure of his experiment. It was the very first sign of its success.
So for the second half of his 30 days, he rebuilt his entire approach. He didn't abandon the principles, but he started applying them with compassion and nuance, not like some rigid, unforgiving rulebook.
Let's see how he used this realization to build a much more sustainable practice.
This table just summarizes the shift perfectly. So instead of just meditating on disaster, he started planning a virtuous response to it. Instead of trying to suppress his emotions, he acknowledged them and then focused on the actionable steps he could take. And in his relationship, he realized that choosing his response meant he could consciously choose to respond with warmth and empathy.
So here's the crucial distinction. It was never about becoming an emotionless robot. The ancient Stoics weren't robots. They were just people trying to navigate a really difficult world. The real goal is to feel your feelings without letting them get in the driver's seat and take the wheel entirely.
This brings us to the final, actionable takeaway from all of this. What does a healthier, more useful version of modern Stoicism actually look like? Well, the author uses this fantastic metaphor. It's not armor that you hide inside, but a compass to help guide you.
So here's a simple, practical framework. First, just acknowledge the feeling. Okay, shame is here. Don't judge it, just see it. Second, ask yourself what's actually in your control, not the feeling itself, but your next action. And third, choose a response that lines up with your values, a virtuous response, whether that's courage or compassion or just simple honesty.
This quote really just captures the entire journey, doesn't it? That initial, flawed approach was all about building armor, about deflecting pain. The breakthrough, though, led to seeing Stoicism as a tool for navigation, a way to find your bearings within the storm, not to pretend the storm doesn't exist.
And that's really the ultimate lesson here. The internet might try to sell Stoicism as some quick hack for emotional invincibility, but the reality is that it's a practice. It's difficult, it's messy, and it requires a ton of self-compassion. But the reward isn't an escape from life. It's a richer, more meaningful way to actually live it.
So, to wrap up this explainer, let's just leave you with this thought. Because the point was never to stop the storm, but to learn how to be a better captain of your own ship. And that leaves us with a question for you. Looking at your own life, your own challenges, what is one small thing that is truly in your control right now?